Welcome back to Z-Speed and thanks for tuning back in. Today I'm going to show you everything you'll need for an automatic to manual swap on your Nissan 350Z. So just stay tuned. Now, when swapping your automatic transmission to a manual transmission on your 350Z, you'll need quite a few parts to make this swap successful. So in this video, we're going to go through part by part everything you need to make this transition as smooth as possible. One of the first things you'll need is a bit of time to actually accumulate all the parts necessary. It's taken me about 2.5 to 3 months to track down everything I need, and that will vary just depending on your location and your budget. So let's start off by talking about the 6-speed manual transmission itself. Now, if your budget allows it, you can purchase a brand new transmission like I did from Z1 Motorsport, and I paid $2,084. I saved a couple $100 by actually driving up there myself to pick it up. I only live a couple hours away, so that helped a little bit. The good news with this is that it comes pre-filled with gear oil. It has a 12,000 mile warranty like the original factory transmissions do, and it's the latest version of the CD009, so you know those are the better transmissions for the 350Z. And it also has a brand new throwout bearing, of course, and fork, and it comes pre-lubed and ready to go. So really all you have to do is just bolt this thing up and you're pretty much worry-free here. So that's the advantage. The disadvantage is it's quite expensive. So if you can afford it, that'd be a good way to go. But I also checked out eBay here, and I found prices ranging from about $700 to about $1,250. And the availability kind of varies from day to day, of course, just depending on, you know, who's bidding on these transmissions and buying them. So you could probably check that every day and just look for new transmissions as they pop up. And last but certainly not least is your local junkyards, and I think that's probably where you're going to find your best deal. And I found a couple transmissions local to my area. They range from about $500 to about $650, and I thought that was pretty doggone reasonable. So if you're on a budget, that's probably going to be something you want to check into. Okay, next up, let's talk about transmission jack stands here. I picked this one up from Harbor Freight. I think it was right around $250. I'm not exactly sure, but I'll try to link one from Amazon below if I can. And this thing was really beneficial if you're by yourself, especially. This big flat plate really keeps your transmission stable. You can throw a chain over it, so it's nice and safe and sturdy, and it'll really keep this thing from falling over and crushing your arms or your legs. And that's the last thing you want, obviously, if you're working by yourself, to have this thing fall off on you. Now, if you've got a friend helping you out, a traditional floor jack will work just fine. You just have to have somebody place a piece of wood on top of this and then kind of hold the transmission as you lower it. But if you have two people, I've seen people do it pretty safely and without problems. But if you're by yourself, you would definitely want to consider using a transmission jack stand. Next up, let's talk about the carbon fiber manual drive shaft. Unfortunately, it's not the same as the automatic drive shaft, so we can't reuse it. And I purchased this on eBay for about $160. I saw one as low as $110, but I didn't pull the trigger on time, and somebody else snapped that one up. So, you know, you just take your time and look around. Hopefully you can get one for under $200. Just make sure that there's no scratches on the carbon fiber area, and then make sure that there's no rust on the end of the drive shaft where it mates up to the manual transmission. I actually purchased one from a junkyard here, but it just had a lot of rust on it, and I was able to get most of it off, but I was afraid that it might fuse to the manual transmission. Next up, let's talk about your hydraulic clutch line. This hooks your master cylinder up to your slave cylinder. This is from a 2005, but it will fit in the 0304. Now, the 0304 has a little bit different configuration on the bottom here. It has like a little swirl, but I believe these hard clutch lines will fit in any year all the way up to the 07. I picked this up for about 20 or 30 bucks at a junkyard. I think they go for about 80 bucks on eBay. Now let's talk about the clutch pedal here. This is an aftermarket RJM clutch pedal. It's a very nice high-end clutch pedal, and this is your standard 2005 clutch pedal that will work in the 04. And I picked this up pretty doggone cheap, about 25, 30 bucks at a junkyard. You can see it's a little rusty here, but you could use this. And I started reading online about the way this spring mechanism works here, and I heard it's kind of clunky. It's not a really good feel, and a lot of people were complaining about the way it engaged. And so I thought I would try this aftermarket clutch pedal. I've heard really great things about this. It's got a nicer spring. It engages a lot better, and it's just a lot easier and smoother when you're shifting. So it's a little pricey at 340 bucks, but if you don't have the extra cash, you can go ahead with your standard clutch here. And I did see these sell as high as 225 on eBay now. And then you also have to change out your brake pedal, because this one's a little bit smaller than your automatic brake pedal. And I picked this one up from eBay for about 65, 70 bucks. And I did notice that it was a lot easier to find a brake pedal than it was to find an actual clutch pedal. Now let's talk about the manual shift console or bezel. Now I picked this one up at a junkyard for like 15 bucks. You can't beat that deal. And I resprayed it, put a new boot in there, and this thing looks like brand new. So you can still use your same climate control switches. They fit right in there. But if you want to find one of these on eBay, you expect to pay anywhere from $119 to 200 bucks for one of these. So hopefully you'll be able to pick one up at a junkyard. Now let's talk about the shifter assembly itself. You're going to need this little plastic cup that the shifter sits into, along with the spring and this bolt that holds it in place. Now I bought all these brand new at Nissan because you really kind of want to start off with a fresh new setup for your shifting mechanism. And I went ahead and bought a short shifter from Stillen for about $295 right here, and that shifter knob was about 50 bucks. So you can spend anywhere from 100 to 400 bucks on your shifting mechanism or shift lever, and that's up to you. Now this little bracket and boots right here I picked up from eBay for about 50, 60 bucks. Is really expensive at Nissan, so I don't recommend Nissan for that one. And you'll need this little dust cover right here that actually fits right over that cup, and that keeps all the dust and dirt out of there. And you'll need 3 bolts and this little plate right here. I picked the bolts and the plate up from Nissan. So at this point, you're probably wondering, how did you source some of these small little nuts and bolts and boots? And I couldn't find some of these at the junkyard. I couldn't find some of these at eBay, and that's what happened to me too, of course. So I went online to Nissan Parts and Accessories, and I typed in my make, year, and model and a manual transmission. And so I just started looking at the schematics for like the shifting mechanism right here, and I could not find that plastic boot anywhere online or on eBay or at a junkyard, or the nuts that held that little plate down. So you can see I highlighted those, and I just started purchasing them from Nissan directly. Couldn't find that little bolt that holds the linkage to the transmission to the short shifter, so I had to have that, of course, and I wanted the right one. And then I went over here and I could not find the reservoir or the hose or the clamps or the gasket and nuts to the master cylinder, so I went ahead and ordered all that. Of course, you want to keep this type of ordering to a minimum because Nissan charges top dollar for all of these parts. So I ended up spending about a little under $200 for just a handful of parts. So here's an example. The actual reservoir cup or the lid to the cup is almost 14 bucks for that. And then the actual reservoir itself was 71 bucks. So you can see that it will add up really quickly once you start buying parts from Nissan. So you want to keep that to a bare minimum. But of course, you can only source some of these parts from Nissan themselves. You're just not going to find them in a junkyard. Okay, these 2 bolts right here actually hold a slave cylinder to the transmission, and then we've got the parts for the master cylinder right here. I went ahead and bought a brand new one. Of course, you can buy an old one and then buy a rebuild kit and save money for sure that way. But I decided to go ahead and buy a brand new one. Here's the hose that goes to the actual reservoir cup. And you're probably gonna have to buy a brand new one of these because it's just hard to find anything that's in decent shape. You know, after 13, 14, 15 years, they start to break down. Here's that bolt I was talking to you about earlier that holds the short shifter to the transmission linkage. So you just kind of want to go through the schematics that I showed you earlier and make sure that you've actually got each one of these bolts, unless you actually find it on a car at like a pull apart or a wrecking yard. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to find every nut and bolt you'll need unless you source them from Nissan themselves. Okay, I am going to recommend you buy a brand new slave cylinder because those go bad over time. And I would also recommend that you buy a braided stainless steel clutch line. I got mine from Z1 Motorsports, but this really improves the feel of your clutch. Now let's talk about the transmission mount here. I picked up a polyurethane mount from Z1 Motorsport and it was about $108. But if you're not interested in spending that kind of money, you can go ahead and reuse your transmission mount as long as it's in good condition, because it should work with your new manual setup. Now I also picked up a new rear main seal because I wasn't sure of the condition. I thought it might be leaking, and I was definitely right. It was leaking really bad, so I had to replace that. But if your rear main seal is not leaking, don't mess with it, because let me tell you, that was pretty difficult to install. So I would have one on hand though, just in case you have to replace it. Now let's talk about the clutch itself. Here's my steel braided clutch line and a throwout bearing that came with my new clutch. And I purchased one from Z1 Motorsport. Now it was about $650, but I went with a performance style clutch, and it has a, bunch of different options. Now I did have to purchase these bolts and washers separately to hold my pressure plate on, but that was the only thing I had to purchase separately besides the bolts that hold my actual flywheel on, and you will have to purchase those as well. But you get your choice of lightweight flywheel or a standard flywheel and a different friction plate. You can get a 6-puck or standard. You can take your pick, or you can pick one up that's a little cheaper from eBay. It just depends on your budget. I also picked up a bag of actual transmission mount bolts just because I wasn't sure what was going to happen when I pulled mine out, if anything was going to snap or break. And it's a good idea to have these on hand just in case you run into any problems, so you don't have to wait for these bolts. If you do break one, you can just slap your transmission on without waiting. You'll already have a spare set on hand in case you run into problems. Now let's talk about this transmission brace. Unfortunately, you cannot use your automatic transmission brace. This is a manual transmission brace. You can see it says CVT MT, and I picked this up at a junkyard. But yeah, you're gonna have to replace that because the holes are in different spots here. So you can pick one of these up online for about 75, 80 bucks. I found this one for like 30 at a junkyard, and I was able to reuse these bolts right here that hold the brace on, and the center bolt right here that runs through this brace and into the polyurethane mount that I bought right here. Now hopefully yours will still be in good shape like mine, or you could pick some up from like Z1 Motorsports. So that about wraps it up. Just about everything you're gonna need to do your automatic to manual swap. There's just one little thing that I didn't show you because I actually haven't got it yet from Nissan, but it's been ordered, and that's on the right hand side of your screen. On top of your automatic transmission, there's this little breather tube that's attached to the dipstick here. Now you can see that we obviously are not going to have a dipstick on our manual transmission, but there's a little rubber tube that runs from right here on top of the transmission to this dipstick mounted little breather tube, and that just allows airflow. So we don't have that here. You can see we just got that little breather tube coming up out, and it actually attaches to one of the transmission mounting bolts. So I've got that on order. I can't remember. I think it was like it was like 38 bucks from Nissan. So if you can find one at a junkyard, you'll save yourself some money. You probably get it for a couple bucks. But that's it. That's all you're going to need to do the swap. Now there's one other way that you might be able to save quite a bit of money or even make some money, and that is to buy a totaled manual 350Z that's the exact same year as your car or close to it from a place like Copart. You can see right here, this one is being bid on. It's only at $325 right now. You might even be able to pick one up for $1,500, $2,000 or $3,000 and then get the parts that you need if you get one with like a side impact or a rear impact, and then you could part the rest of it out and actually even make some money. So that is a possible way to do the swap and make money or break even. So I hope this video helped you out on your journey to swap out your automatic transmission to a nice manual 6-speed transmission. And if it did, just give me a big old fat thumbs up. And if you're not subscribed, what are you waiting for? Come on, join the Z-Speed team. Until next time, you know what to do. Just keep on repairing.